Hi, and welcome back. In this lesson, we will talk about the context for Agile leadership. But before we actually do that, let's take a few steps back and recap what we covered in Module 1 of this course. In that module, we looked at the Stacy diagram, which helped us understand the different domains of work and where agility would be appropriate in the complex and chaos domain. Now think about the world around you. Are we seeing more simple and complicated domains, or are we actually seeing more complex and chaos domains? Obviously, this is a rhetorical question. In almost every industry, every company, every organization, we are seeing the rise of more and more complexity or chaos, which makes it necessary for teams, individuals, and whole organizations to apply more empirical process control. Now, who's in charge of raising the awareness and sharing those capabilities? In many organizations, it is Scrum Masters or Agile coaches who do that. But before we have those Scrum Masters and Agile coaches in place, we need to have leaders, we need to have managers that make a conscious decision for their organization to start applying these tools, techniques, and frameworks. This, of course, also has implications on how we lead in general. Are we going to still tell people what to do and how to do it? Of course not. Probably, if we really want to have more agility, which means more speed in decision-making, more customer centricity, we need to provide the teams and individuals with more freedom to make those decisions about what to do and how to do it. In our next lesson, The History of Management, we will explore this a bit deeper. Now let's go back to some of the drivers that result in more complexity for organizations. We see increased regulation, not only in the pharmaceutical or medtech space. We see hyper-competition from organizations that never competed with other organizations before. This is due to companies like Amazon or Apple completely ignoring industry boundaries and moving into new industries all the time. We also see the rise of many more startups, especially in areas where it was previously much more difficult for startups to get into. Just think about all those fintech companies that are coming up, which are a real threat to both insurances and banks. But we also see a whole lot of different challenges. At the point of this recording, in the May of 2023, we have been through a global pandemic. We are still seeing the implications of the supply chains being completely broken. We are seeing the implications of a war in Europe and many other things that drive complexity, that drive uncertainty for individuals, teams, and organizations. This increased level of complexity or uncertainty, which a lot of people refer to as the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, results in more organizations having the need to apply more agility. One of my trainer colleagues, Craig Larman, always speaks about having the ability to turn on a dime for a dime, which means that the cost of change in your organization should be very low and you should be able to change very quickly. This is organizational agility. And it is ultimately the leader's responsibility, no matter whether it's a hierarchical or a non-hierarchical leader, to help the organization to build up this skill set, to build up this capability. There are also certain internal drivers for this need for change. One of the biggest ones is the level of engagement of employees. Every year or every other year, Gallup does a study with many organizations, large and small, across the whole world. Now, the results of that study are always very frightening from my perspective. We see that around 15% of employees are actively engaged at work. Around 70% of employees are more or less neutral, and a higher percentage of employees is actively disengaged than actively engaged. Now think about it. How would your business change if you just slightly increase the number of actively engaged employees? If you can move the needle up to 20, 25, maybe even 30%, that would mean that your organization not just becomes more productive, It probably becomes more creative. It probably becomes more customer-centric, more service-oriented, which will ultimately result in more value for your customers and more value for your business. So when we look at Agile leadership, it is supposed to be the answer for all of these external and internal drivers for change. We want Agile leaders to facilitate or to catalyze the change that needs to happen within organizations. Change in how we are structured, change in the policies, and change in the metrics of how we evaluate success within our organizations. In our next video, we will look at the history of management or leadership. We will look at how leadership has changed, not in all, but in certain companies over the past 120 years, and what the patterns of change have been. I'll see you in that video.